Right, welcome everybody to the Wimbledon Community Forum. There are, I just counted, something like 10 members of the community here who aren't councillors. That is one of the issues we're going to explore later. As a community forum, we want actually the community to take part and see it as an important part of the democratic process. And we'll talk about that a bit later, and I know Eleanor's going to speak about that at the moment. I think it seems sensible to introduce the councillors who are here for our 10 members of the community. So starting with Councillor Stringer from Wandle.
Hello, I'm Councillor Eleanor Stringer. I represent Wandle Ward and I'm also a Joint Deputy Leader responsible for Civic Pride.
From Abbey.
I'm Claire. I'm new councillor for Abbey Ward.
And for Hillside, we have two councillors here, both the councillors from Hillside. Daniel.
Hello everybody. I'm Susie, I'm the other half of Hillside.
Daniel's other half. From Village, we have
Andrew Howard, pleased to meet you.
And from Cannon Hill, this is unusual, excellent.
It's not unusual at all, Michael Patterson, Cannon Hill.
I'm Paul Kohler, I'm the councillor for Wimbledon Town Centre. We have none of the councillors from Wimbledon Park because they're all attending the Wimbledon Park Residents Association. Again, that's one of the issues. The residents associations don't even see this as important, and so there's often clashes. So these are all things we need to think about as a community. I will be nominally chairing these from the outset. James used to do it, he's no longer a councillor, James Holmes. I would like to record, I think in the minutes officially, how grateful we are to James. He was a brilliant chair in my view. Utterly non-partisan, utterly fair, always put the members of the community first and told the councillors to wait in line to speak. So I'd like to record, if everyone's happy with that, our thanks to James for all he did. I will try and keep him in mind when I chair these meetings. Right, is there anything else I need to say? Chris, of course, is really the power behind the throne, and I will look to him for advice continuously. Right, we're going to start with policing, and we have Sergeant Peppett here, along with Scott. And I will leave the floor to Sergeant Peppett. James, you don't mind being called James, do you?
Yeah, no,
James.
that's fine.
And he'll give a presentation and there'll be time for questions. So over to you.
Thank you very much. Hello everyone, my name's James. I have recently taken over from Marcia Heritage, who you may have known as the Sergeant for the Wimbledon Ward of the Safe Neighbourhoods team. She is now the Acting Inspector for Merton Neighbourhoods, which we are all very pleased about. So I've been here since the end of May. Before that I was over at Mitcham as an Acting Sergeant, and before that I've been in Wimbledon Town Centre for 4 years. So I've been here for quite a while. This is my first forum meeting, so I'm not really sure what to bring out, but what I will say is, obviously since I've been here, I don't know how long this post is going to last. It may be that they recruit somebody else to take the places. I'm only acting at the moment, as opposed to it being a permanent position. But while I'm here, my plan is, what I would like to achieve is a bit more confidence from the public in the police. We have noticed that confidence has dropped in Merton Borough, and I'd be very keen to know how best we can try and drive up some confidence for the next survey. I will also be looking at, obviously, keeping yourself safe, making sure that my officers are visible, that they're out and about, they're on patrol, and also that we're tackling crime that matters, such as violence, theft from motor vehicles, burglaries, robberies, those kind of things, as well as trying to deal with the other issues that you may bring to us. Hopefully you've all met your ward officers. If you haven't, I'm sure they will make efforts to meet you at some point. I have asked them to get in contact with the new councillors. So the main bit is the ward boundary changes. Obviously we've lost Trinity, we've now got Wandle. From an S&T point of view, we've sorted that all out. We have the officers in place. What we don't have, however, is the computer systems. They're not ready to move over to the new ward boundaries. So you will have to bear with us. There will be some teething problems while we have to basically look, especially at the boundaries, the individual bits to see, is it Wandle, is it Dundonald, is it Abbey? But that will catch up and they are working on it. So it will happen and everything will be back to normal, but we'll do our best in the time being. Just a little bit of updates of what we've got. So we've obviously got the tennis coming up soon. I have got a plan in place for that, to have officers out in the town centre. I'm asking our volunteer special constables to come in as well. so that we have a presence in the town centre during that time. Summer nights as well, as the nights get longer, we are looking at having 1 sergeant and 6 PCs out in a minibus, travelling around Wimbledon, responding to any antisocial behaviour calls, and that we're looking at doing that Thursdays to Sunday nights, so that we have some coverage on that as well. In terms of Dundonald Wimbledon Town, it has obviously become quite a big award. We have probationers that come on 6-month rotations to neighbourhoods. Scott is one of them. He is attached to the Dundonald and Wimbledon Town ward, and we now have 2 of them, bringing the total strength up to 4 officers, because technically we've combined 2 wards into 1. So I don't want you to think there's just 1 ward officer running around trying to cover 2 wards. That has been sorted. The other bit of good news is we've overtaken Sutton as the 3rd safest borough in the Met, only behind Kingston and Twickenham for total notifiable offences, which is really good. I don't think we'll ever get to number 1, but we'll do our best. We'll do our best. And just in terms of what we've been working on, we've got a number of different things, but we have been doing a lot of dangerous dogs recently. So we've issued a lot of warning letters. We've done some warrants to seize dogs and get them looked at. And also we have several investigations about various different pieces, from drugs supply to robbery stuff. So if you don't see our officers out and about, it's not that they're not in, it's just that they are doing other bits in the background, and it may be that you don't see it, but I can assure you that the stuff that they're doing is really trying to have an impact on the stuff we do on the ward. That is about it from me, to be honest. I will open it up if anybody's got any questions they want to ask.
Right, non-councillors first of all. Community.
Hello.
I think I've got faces probably known to the police, but anyway, with respect to drugs which are currently deemed to be illegal, Sadiq Khan, I understand, is sort of like punting around this consultation, maybe about changing the way in which the criminal response to that is made. So rather than fines, banging people up or whatever, it's putting them through some kind of program. How do you see that starting, going, being a runner? Would it be useful within the kind of issues that occur in parts of Marriott?
I mean, to be honest, most of that already happens. So for low-level offences of possession, we have what's called a community resolution, which was our old street warnings. So if we found somebody with a small amount of cannabis that is deemed to be personal use, we can issue them a warning on the street that basically says if you do it again, you're liable to be arrested. That saves my officers time, so they don't have to end up arresting them, taking them into custody for what is sometimes about that much cannabis. We do often have diversions as well for people, mainly young people under 18. So we refer them to Catch 22 or the youth offending team, who will try and put some sort of diversion work in there so that they stop getting involved in cannabis. Maybe it's that they're in the wrong crowd, maybe it's that they don't have enough diversion activities. So it's still going, but obviously we would then be led by whatever legislation changes the government make in terms of how we would then do that. But we are well aware that it does take up a bit of our time, and we'll always try and deal with it in the most efficient way, whilst making sure that while it is illegal, people don't get away with it, if that makes sense. Hopefully that answered your question.
Mike?
You mentioned a diminishing amount of competence of Wimbledon. You perceived there to be a diminishing amount of confidence from Wimbledon people, Merton people. Can you suggest why, or has there been sort of investigation on why this may be so, as far as you're concerned, as far as the police are concerned?
I wouldn't like to answer that too much, because I haven't seen the surveys and I haven't seen the comments that have been made. I know that there have been some comments made that some people still don't know how to contact their local officers, and if they had a local problem, they don't know who to speak to, which does affect confidence, which is why obviously I'm trying to make sure that officers get in contact with the new councillors so that continuity is not lost. So from my point of view, from a safer neighbourhoods point of view, what I want is for us to be visible and for us to be contactable, so that, you know, if you have a local problem, you know who you can pick up the phone or you can email, rather than saying, well, it'd be nice to, I don't need to phone 101, but it'd be nice to speak to somebody. And I think that was one of the biggest complaints when it comes to SNT, is how do I actually contact my local police officers? Who are my local police officers? So that's the work we're doing. And in fact, I have asked them to do what is called Street a Week. So we've asked them to go down various different streets. They can pick whichever ones they like. I'm not going to tell them which ones. And it's more about just introducing themselves again, coming around and saying, hello, we're ward officers. Is there anything you'd like to know? here's a mailing list that you can access, that kind of thing. So that's when I'm looking at confidence from that bit. I want to make sure that people are confident that they know how to contact us, they know who their local ward officers are, and they know that we're dealing with things that matter to them. But I wouldn't like to comment as a whole, as I haven't read the survey, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that.
The initials you came up there, what was that? SNT? Did you
Sorry,
say?
Safe and Neighbourhood Team. Yeah, so
Thank
us.
you. Thank you.
But where can we find that information?
Could I find it?
Where can we find it?
That is a very good question. I would have to come back to you on that one. I don't know if they do publish the results of the survey. I could be
But I
totally
mean
wrong.
also
It
the
could do.
contact details.
Oh, to contact us. So we obviously it's on our website. The difficulty is, as I said to you, the systems haven't been updated.
Okay.
So if you put in your postcode, you may still come up as Trinity, which doesn't exist, but you might form part of Dundonald, you might form part of Wandle. But they will be updated, and then what you'll be able to do is go on the Met's website, put your postcode in, and it will just bring up your local offices. So it's just met.police.uk.
On that point, I don't know if everyone knows, there are police panels on every ward where the members of the community sit down with ward officers and talk about priorities for the ward. That's something we are also going to look at, because a lot of them aren't working very well at the moment. So that would, part of that would be communicating exactly who your ward officers are and how they talk to the community. And that's something that happens again non-politically to council therefore. Peter.
Yes, when I moved here, there were safe and neighbourhood teams with, I think, 3 officers and a sergeant for each ward. And I think there's 10 wards in Wimbledon. I just wondered what the figures are now, please.
So there is still, obviously as part of the commitment, there's still 2 designated ward officers and 1 PCSO per ward. Obviously, as I've said, temporarily, I've had 4 on Dundonald and Wimbledon Town while they're on their 6-month rotation. In terms of sergeants, they each have responsibilities for different wards. So when I was over at Mitcham, I looked after 3, and now I'm here at Wimbledon, I look after 4. So it's roughly about that 3 or 4 wards. As you've got Ben Hobbs, the sergeant over there, who covers the village, Wimbledon Park and Rains Park as well. So yeah, it's about 3 or 4 wards for the sergeants, but every ward does have at least 2 PCs and 1 PCSO.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I didn't know about these wall things that you mentioned. Perhaps the other part about information and publicity would be there are a number of community notice boards that Merton Council, housing associations, and some other like institutions, churches or other community centres. Could the information on that be updated?
Yeah, I mean this is what I'm looking at currently. I would like ward panels to be attendable for almost anyone in the ward. I think that's what it should be. But yes, how we go about doing that, you're right, is using all of these different tools that we've got available that perhaps we haven't been utilising in the past, so that we can get the message out there. Because yeah, I want the responses from as many people on the ward as they can, so that we can make sure we're doing the things that matter to you, that you bring up that we might not even know about. Obviously, we get our information from yourselves. When you say, oh, there's that house that people have been going in and out of all day, or there's that house that had blackout curtains on the windows and nobody's ever going in and out of it. That's where we get our information from. And if we're not able to speak to you, we're not able to get that information. So yeah, no, you're definitely right. There is other avenues we can look at, and that's certainly something I will be looking at.
Anyone else? What about the councillors? Oh, sorry, Mike.
No, it's all right. It's just, do you think, or have you come across, I guess the survey was pretty targeted that you've done on this confidence thing. Has the lack of clarity or decision making on the future of the police station been mentioned at all in this at all?
I mean, it's highly likely. I know there was a lot of...
I'm sure there are other people here who know more about it than all sorts. So
Yeah. I mean, it definitely was a topic of conversation. Whether or not it's had an impact this round, as I said, I couldn't say until I actually look at it myself.
Okay.
I wouldn't be able to tell you, unfortunately.
Yeah, fair enough.
So with your hand up.
No, sorry.
Would any of the councillors like to ask any questions?
Or only to give like the latest update we've heard about the police station, because obviously we as a council are worried about this as well, and so with taking on responsibility for police and community safety, we really tried to get in touch with the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime about this. And basically the decision key they're still looking at the estates and all of the stations that they have across London as part of their estate strategy, but that's being pushed back and pushed back and pushed back because they're blaming it because they have to look at some new strategy coming out on housing, and there was something else, I can't remember what it was. But all we've had is it's going to be later this year, there will be some decision.
It's pretty long running, isn't it?
It's pretty long running, but then what's clear at the moment is, there are more police officers, and Wimbledon police station is being well used by the police officers. So I'm confident and hoping that is showing the need for it, and that whilst we've got more officers, it is a brilliant place for them to be based. Like, it's so central and so accessible.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with you.
Yeah. You can't get drawn into political debates, but
No,
exactly.
but yeah, until we get the email from our bosses that tell us what's happening, we're none the wiser at the moment.
I'm just a mere punter, I just want to is anything happening at all? And from your side?
Not that I've heard, no. As you said, it's very much we'll let you know when we know kind of thing, and then we'll be able to let you know, if that makes sense.
It does make sense.
Because these discussions are well above my little stripes.
Sarah?
Is there any indication if crime is going up or coming down pre-COVID, post-COVID, for particular areas or not? There's a lot of development going on. That's going to bring in a lot of nightlife. Where are we, and how do you cope with it? Do you still have the same numbers? Do you put more of them on beat? How does it work?
So yeah, in terms of the first question, I know Scott did have a look at some of the crimes to give you an idea of where we're at. But yes, what was it? There was some have increased quite a bit. But then when we look at the fact that this is comparing it year on year, like you say, with COVID, we would expect them to go up because now people are back out in the streets. Whereas some of them have decreased, which we would expect because people aren't out in the, people are back out in the streets. But what ones did we look at particularly?
Yeah, so just having a look, I can go back a number of years looking at crime statistics, etc. Especially around the last 2-3 years, COVID, etc. There's been a complete shift in crime trends. For example, just looking at some hot topics such as burglary, there's been a great decrease over the last 3 months compared to last year. So we've had an 18% decrease in burglaries, whereas there has been an increase in more kind of personal contact crimes such as robbery, where there is more people going out onto the streets, mixing, exactly like you touched on, the nightlife is coming back in Wimbledon. So naturally there is seeing a new trend in different kind of hotspot crimes coming out. And of course, we're just trying to beat the curve as we can.
And in terms of, like you said, what we look to do about it, part of what we do is, like you say, look at crimes. We identify what's going up and then we'll do it. Example being, we know that violence with injury and antisocial behaviour rises in the summer, hence why we're putting in a summer nights plan to have police officers out. So we'll change our shifts to late turns so that we can be out when most of it happens. Equally, in terms of burglaries and robberies, we do have a burglary and robbery team. They're not part of the Safer Neighbourhoods team, they're part of the CID strands, but they're the ones that focus on that. And this is why we need the community to talk to us, because we need to know where things are happening so that I can put my officers out in the right place. Because it might be that, from what I'm reading, there's 2 burglaries on a street down the road at 8 o'clock at night. But what might be happening is there's 7 in another street and nobody's telling us about them. And I want to know about them so I can make sure that we're where we need to be. So yes, we do look at them, we keep an eye on them. It's very difficult to tell which ones are affected by COVID, which ones aren't, because we do expect as we go into summer, some crimes increase, some crimes decrease. But there have been a couple of shifts that you can clearly see are, like you said, where people are now starting to come out into the street again, where they couldn't in lockdown. So it has changed, but we are doing our best to try and make sure we do it. Obviously, we do get probationers that come in on their 6 months attachments, which bolsters us up. So I think most wards, I couldn't tell you offhand, most wards have got an extra probationer on their 6 month attachment. And then obviously what happens is, usually, when they leave, there's a break and then another one will come in. So that we do get a little bit of extra help with bits and pieces. And we obviously have a really good relationship with our volunteer police officers, the special constables. The Special Sergeant Warren Ayres, we have a really good relationship with him. So if we need extra people, we can normally get people to come in as well to give us a hand with things. So yeah, we will look at it if we need to.
What is the police response to e-scooters?
E-scooters. So the difficulty with e-scooters is there is still a lot of uncertainty with it. Like you can rent e-scooters now, can't you, that are there properly. There are still people out there, despite it being made well aware, that don't know you need insurance to ride an e-scooter.
You need insurance?
Yeah, you do need insurance to actually use it, because it is a mechanically propelled vehicle, so you should have insurance and you should have a licence to obviously use it. But what we're finding is a lot of people don't know that. So when we stop them and tell them it's an offence, they're like, what? What do you mean? The guy told me it was perfectly fine to buy and ride. What are you talking about? So we do a lot of education, and in fact, a lot of us have done that previously around stopping people and saying, look, you can't be doing it, you know, you could be liable to this. But the Safer Transport team, who are based at Wimbledon and Wandsworth, I know they do a lot of operations about it, where they will issue out fines, they'll seize e-scooters if necessary, and we'll do the same thing. It's just, when I'm balancing things, if I would like my officers out to try and target the robberies on the ward, and if there is an e-scooter about, great, if you're in a position to deal with it, but I'd rather you out in those robbery hotspots, looking after you guys, than stopping every e-scooter that drives past. But we will deal with it if it's there, and if there's an offence that takes place, just like we do with a car, we would expect them to deal with it.
It's difficult to police.
It is very difficult, because we're still not sure if it's going to be, you know, legislated so that everyone can use them. It's still very much in the air with the government as to which way they want to go with, you know, whether they're going to do it so you can rent them, like the Boris bikes, or whether they're just going to flat out say you can't have them, and we'll just do our best.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah, really great explanation. I appreciate all that, especially all the data stuff. I think that's super interesting. So I really like the question on the COVID stuff and whether that's had an impact. I'm kind of curious, like, do you ever notice any effects of like recessions, like you know, all the economic turmoil at the moment, and I guess like maybe back in the day, 2008 or whatever. Like, do you see the impact of that on crime levels, or is it just too hard to tell?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, it is a very difficult statistic to say this crime is because that person is suffering the effects of the recession. Yeah, I wouldn't want to say for sure whether or not it's definitely happened. I would imagine it would, but that is literally just my personal opinion. That's not based on any statistics or anything that I can present to you to say yes it does or no it doesn't.
Catalytic converters seem to be on the rise. I mean, every day there's something on next door about cars being stolen. Lots of cars.
Yeah, it is a very difficult crime to prevent, I'll be honest. It does not take long to steal a catalytic converter. And every time they come up with something to protect it, they work it. I mean, it's the same with everything. You come up with something to prevent it, somebody works a way around it. And obviously by the time we're made aware of it and we get down there, they're gone. It only takes minutes to take a converter. But what we do is a lot of prevention with the scrap metal merchants. So we have operations where we're tasked to go and visit the scrap metal merchants. We'll, you know, check that they're complying with their the things that they have to do, make sure that they're not taking scrap that they shouldn't. We ask to investigate. In fact, we have a power to investigate the yards to make sure that there aren't any in there. And if there are catalytic converters in there, then we will ask them to account for it, because they have to fill out a certain form to make sure where it's come from, who it's been sold to, all that kind of stuff. So there is a lot of prevention that we can put in place, but the hardest bit is catching them there and then, because all they've got to do is drive up, jack it up, cut it off, put it in the boot, and they're gone. So it's very difficult to catch them in the act. All we would say is if you notice that there's anybody suspiciously driving around that seems to be eyeing up cars, then just call it in. We'd rather turn up and it be an Uber driver looking for an address than you don't call it up and we've had catalytic converters stolen. So I would just say if there's somebody that you think isn't right, just call it in. We're not going to tell you off for calling it in, it being absolutely fine, rather than going, oh, I'm not going to bother.
And is that calling 999?
I would say if you think genuinely that they're looking for cars, so if they're looking underneath cars or they're getting out and they're having a good look at the cars, yeah, why not?
I'm conscious of time, this is the last one.
I know it's a difficult question, please, you know, monitoring speed, speeding around the borough, and I'm not holding you responsible. I think this is a message to councillors sitting here, that it's all very well to bring in a 20-mile speed limit, but nobody really takes any notice of it. So I think not everywhere hasn't. So it is a bit of an issue, and there are areas which are backlands. I don't want to waste police time by phoning up constantly saying, oh, there's a car going very fast. We have them going down residential roads at 50 miles an hour.
Yeah.
But I would like the councillors to know that.
Can I just endorse that and say that I've been spending time trying to get your speed identification for Alexander Road, looking at trying to get, because around Merton we seem to have 20-mile-an-hour roads which anybody I can try is racing an eyebrow on, they're like Parkside and D3. And then we have 20-mile-an-hour roads where there are schools and children playing, there are lots of pedestrians, and there are little residential areas, and they have 20-mile-an-hour limits and nothing is done about them. And I'm told the council has used up all its funding this year and can't provide any more speed signs for Alexander Road in particular, that's why I asked about. And I'm told that it's really nothing to do with council, it's all to do with you guys. So I'm very interested in what chances there are of increasing enforcement in relation to 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. It's no good saying speed limits are all about safety if you don't enforce them. So if they are not enforced, I don't think we personally do. But they are not being enforced as far as I can see.
That's an issue for the Department of Enforcement Officers for the borough. And when the Wimbledon Society did ask that question, the response came back. But we just hope the residents will be responsible.
Right. I didn't know that.
Shall we let the police answer that question?
So if I can, we that like you say, you wouldn't want to call up every time you see a car coming down, but this is why it's important to know how to contact your local police officers. I'll be honest, we won't be standing on roads all the time because we'd be there all day doing enforcement work and we wouldn't be able to do anything else. The Safer Transport team do speed watch. They do give out tickets for speeding. That is their bread and butter. The difficulty is with the speed guns as well. You have to be trained because you have to know how to calibrate it. And without that, you can't give somebody a ticket because you can't prove that the device you've used accurately gauges your speed. That being said, what we do is community speed watches, and we're very keen to get as many as possible going. And you'll find that a lot of them do slam on the brakes when they just see high-vis jackets and speed guns. They don't know whether it's police or not. They just go, oh, no, there's a camera, and they'll slow themselves right down. What I would say, what ward do you live on, madam? Dundonald. Okay, now you have a Dundonald officer here. What I would say is get in contact with your local ward officers. In fact, before we leave, I will just get Scott to give you an email address, or I'll give it to you. We can then set you up or get you in contact with the right people to set up a community speed watch if that's something you'd like to do. It does go with the Safer Transport team, and they will come along and assist you. And they do, they're the ones that are trained to use the speed guns, and they will give out tickets if necessary. The difficulty with the 20-mile-an-hour limits is there is meant to be an element of traffic calming being put in place rather than just a flat road that says 20 miles an hour. It was put in legislation, I'm led to believe, that there is meant to be a certain amount of traffic calming that goes into that. And that was part of the strategy of these 20-mile-an-hour roads, making it very difficult for someone to do 50 miles an hour because of the bits that are going on. But yes, we would love to have a community speed watch on every ward. So if you're interested in doing it, get in contact with us and we will look at how we can set it up. It'd be great if we had one on every ward. It'd be absolutely fantastic.
Andrew, do you want to say something?
No, I think it's all very contentious. The 20-mile-an-hour limit is the law, so it should be obeyed, certainly. I think it is a challenge. I think I'm often being overtaken. Well, my speed limiter on at 20, 21 maybe, officer, sorry. Sometimes being overtaken by cyclists. Sorry, but that happens. It's a little bit frustrating, especially when you are on dual carriageway, which was otherwise designated as 40 miles an hour, and everyone's going much slower, and I'm thinking, is this actually helping? I don't know, but I'll still do it. But I think it's the same thing for residents. I think it's certainly the side roads where people understand 20 is plenty. Whether they're going at 50 miles an hour, I don't know. Sometimes when we actually do speed guns tests, we find that actually cars that people think are going at 50 miles an hour are not actually going at 50 miles an hour. But it's still a perception that they're going at an unsafe speed, and that's certainly not good enough for the road conditions. But no, it's a difficult one, isn't it? It's a difficult one to enforce.
And as an aside to that, sorry, I know you're at the time. When I previously did a different speed gun, I'm not trained on these here, but it was exactly that. It depends on the angle you're standing when you look at the car. A car that is in fact travelling at 30, if you're at the right angle, it will look like it is zooming past at 70 miles an hour, and it's all about the direction that you're standing and the way that the vehicle's coming, because that's all part of how we have to use the speed gun. So if we stand at the side and scan them as they come in, you know, sort of an angle, they'll register at 60 miles an hour. But if we're standing dead on, they register at 33, 34. So there is an element of that. It does look a lot faster. But yes, no, my basic message is, if you want, you know, if you care about speeding in your ward, get in contact with us, look at setting up a community speed watch. We can run them as often as you can do them, essentially. You know, and as long as we've got people that are on duty, we'll be more than happy to sort it out.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, thank you for the questions, thank you for the answers and the presentation, that's really helpful, thank you.
As I said, as a last bit, we're only round the corner. We are all based at Wimbledon Police Station, so if you really can't find your local ward officers, just pop into the front office. They will give you the contact details for them. We're all keen to hear from you. We'd all like to hear from you, and we want to know what matters to you. So, you know, if you can't find it any other way, you know, the front office is open 24 hours, and they will give you the contact details that you need. But in the meantime, I will work on how we can make sure that every one of you, in no uncertain terms, knows who your ward officers are.
Yeah.
Right, no problem. Yeah, if you're all right,
that information being recorded on the minutes that are sent out after this meeting, so at least there is a core of us who know who contact, and then we could perhaps pass it on if need be amongst contact or people we know. At least it gets it out in there, you know.
I too will can do it. I will email you with all the mailboxes, and you can just ping them out. I'll do it as soon as I get back. Yeah. All right. Right, we'll go. I'll keep that email address with you. Thank you very much. Have a good meeting. Take care.
Now we move to the open forum, which I feel where it's for members of the community to come up with issues they want to raise. I've been notified of 3 things, but if anyone else has something to raise, they of course can do so. Peter, I have you down first.
Oh, right.
I'll get someone else if you'd rather wait. Do you want some time?
No, I'm fine. I just really want to raise, as some of you may know, I do local history walks, the Book Fest, which are quite popular, and I'm pleased to say, and one that I started last year was on Wimbledon and the age of slavery. And the reason I did this really was because I was interested in light of the public discussion on the need to revisit the role of slavery in this country, and I was interested in the role of slavery as it affected Wimbledon. And I did some research, and I discovered that we have roads in Wimbledon named after slave owners who lived in Wimbledon. And the 2 most prominent ones are Marriott Road and Drax Avenue. The council passed a resolution in 2020 saying, "We support the need to show solidarity and continue the fight for equality and justice, and would urge local residents who wish to show that Black Lives Matter and to continue to do so safely to honour George Floyd and many others who have lost their lives." And since then, nothing has been done in terms of the slave names that we use in this area. I'm not looking to eradicate the names of the roads necessarily, and I certainly refute rewriting history. I'm adding to history. And I think it's very clear from the walks I've run that there is a great deal of interest and outrage that we have roads without any mention that these roads are named after slave owners. So if I'm just, and I've written to every councillor about this 18 months ago, and not a word has responded, not one of them. And so I think it's quite interesting that, you know, something like 11 million Africans were moved from Africa to the West Indies. 1.4 million were thrown overboard because they were sick or died. And two of the people who were involved in this, Joseph Marriott Mp, who was a contemporary of William Wilberforce, who you probably know lived on a house in by the Common. He had 1,400 slaves and opposed all efforts to abolish slavery. And when in 1833 the country abolished slavery, they didn't do it for ethical reasons. What they did was they paid slave owners for the slaves they had. And Mr. Marriott received today's equivalent of £8.5 million. And so he's one of them. The other person is the Drax family, and I'm delighted to say the only effect from my campaign was that the girls of Wimbledon High School decided to rename their sports hall, which was called Draxmont Hall, so that it was not named after a slave owner. And the Drax family have a long history going back. They owned Canizaro House and all the land down to the Portsmouth Road, and 4 generations of the Drax family, and to this day, the current person who is the inheritor of the Drax plantation, who is an MP, he actually owns the sugar plantation in Barbados, and he says, I cannot be held responsible for the sins of my forebears, but he still owns the sugar plantation, and he's still got roads named after him. Draxmont Avenue off Wimbledon Hill, Drax Avenue. And I just thought at some stage, I keep asking that we at least do what Edinburgh Council have done, Plymouth Council have done, Bristol Council most notably when their jury returned a not guilty verdict for pulling down a statue about a slave trader, that, you know, we should do something to cleanse the stain of slavery from. And so I've given up with councillors, although some of them are here, they may want to respond, because they have the power to change road names or put a little notice on, which is what's happened in other local authority areas. And I think we owe it to the people of Wimbledon. We certainly owe it to the fact that we've got a very significant ethnic minority group in the borough. I rest my case.
Thank you, Peter. Before I open up the questions, just 2 points I feel I should make. I'm aware of at least one councillor did respond, so I don't think we should attack all councillors for that. But secondly, you make a really powerful point, which is a community forum is there for bottom-up democracy. The community forum has the power to put forward motions to council. So whilst we've not developed that at all, nor we've worked out how that would happen within the constitution of the council, you could come up with something like that, put a motion forward that would then be debated in council. So you do have that power. And I'm hoping that's how we will use the community forum in the future. So I think it's important to hold councils to account. I think we should caricature what councils are doing, but equally, bottom-up democracy, it really is important the community can come up with motions to be debated. Any questions now to Peter?
I'm quite fascinated by the history, and I think maybe there is potential for you, there's something across with the libraries and the annual Merton History Day and things like that, which occur at the library, to actually have a correlation between how the names of roads in Wimbledon, Merton, Mitcham, etc., have actually acquired their names. Because to me, every time I cycle around Wimbledon Hill, to me, Drax just reminds me of a power station in Yorkshire, So I have no correlation or connection with people people obviously who gave them money to do something which was legal at the time, even if it was immoral. And I think clearly Merton and Wimbledon has a great proud tradition that they actually stood up against this and other injustices at the time, and things since then in terms of how we treat asylum seekers, those from Belgium in the First World War, and so on. So I think it is part of our history, but for this area, it almost like it could be worse, but the things that happened in the 18th and early 19th century are part of history, but I don't think they're as relevant as perhaps some people try and push. I don't think we need to be offended by it, but we do need to be educated by it, because it is very easy that we will fall into oppressing people again.
So could we use...
Hold on. First, not councillors. First, members of the public.
So could we not put forward a motion to the council on this from today's forum? To do what? If we wanted to. To put forward perhaps making a note on those streets that are named after slave traders, that they're named after slave traders.
Without a doubt, Committee 4 do have the power to do so. What I've struggled with is how we would sort out the wording of it. We have no structure to do that at this stage.
We can agree the broad wording now, and then it goes as part of the report to the next full council meeting.
And then I will. The trouble is, then it's an emotion, isn't it? Just
yeah, it was a motion that comes as part of your report.
Oh, okay.
It was a motion, then voted on and agreed. So previously we've done things like call on cabinet members to investigate X or to follow up. So you can phrase it fairly broadly, then you're going to get a response from the administration or from the council at the next meeting.
Okay, well let's pursue that.
Could we just make sure the wording is approved by any Labour councillors here, please? Because my experience of this community forum, because Wimbledon tends to be, and I don't want to pass it political, I'm not generally party political, but because it's a Labour administration, I always get the impression that they just stamp on a thing.
No, let's keep it above politics here, or party politics here at this stage.
The motions that have been submitted from this forum in the past have always gone through.
Sarah.
Well, we have it from experience, which is why we're saying just be aware that whatever wording you painstakingly put together, there will be changes, or possibly will be changes. So just be aware.
Yeah, I think this is why Chris has said it would be in broad terms. It would I hope, to take the essence of what Peter was talking about. And I was really struck by when Peter said he's not rewriting or destroying history, he's adding to it. I thought it's a very powerful argument, actually. I have a councillor who's very keen to speak. Any non-councillors first? And I do not want this to descend into Labour will do this, Tories will do this, Liberals will do that. Please, I do not want it to descend into that. It's not what this is about.
Can we put together tonight a very simple motion to the Cabinet which says that we as a community would like signs put up which contextualise the history of where the money's come from in relation to previous Labour administration. It doesn't have to define what they're going to say, it simply has to say that we're asking them to provide contextualisation. And then we have the fight about the words later.
Sorry, Ellen.
Let them go first.
Can I just ask a question? So I love that you've done this research.
It's a bit
I love that you've done all this research, Peter. I think it's a wonderful thing to bring up, so thank you. My question is, I don't understand that. Oh, Susie, so these motions we're talking about, so we're talking about putting up some kind of a notice?
I think
for people
drafts it, and it goes to the Cabinet, and they have to act on it.
Right.
So it's like saying...
They don't have to act on it.
They don't have to act on it. We're asking it. But it would be pretty embarrassing if they did.
Okay, and then I'm curious, is there any kind of dialogue that happens with the people who live on the streets?
No. Not that I know of.
So they basically get a notice saying, hey, just to let you know, this is the context of the street you've been living on.
I think we're all interpreting what Peter was suggesting. Peter, I know Helena, you want to speak, but Peter, do you want to say something?
Well, I just think something to the effect. I mean, Edinburgh Council have a column rather like Nelson's column, erected to a man who used to live in Canizaro House, who actually moved the amendment to Wilberforce's motion to abolish slavery at the end of the 18th century. And they didn't take the statute down, they didn't change the wording, they just put a note on the bottom saying, this recognises something that the actions of the man commemorated on this by opposing the abolition of slavery delayed its implementation, which resulted in something like 2 million more slaves being, being created. And I think that's something I'd like to see on Marriott Road, Marriott Crescent, Draxmont Avenue and Drax Road, with just a note saying this commemorates a slave owner who had, who imposed slavery and they, that kind of thing. And in Plymouth, they've got a square named after Sir John Hawkins, who was Queen Elizabeth's main slave trader, because she provided him with boats to create slaves. And they've changed it to the name of a black footballer who played for Plymouth and was selected in 1926 for the England team because of his goal-scoring record. But when they went down to check him out, the FA suddenly realised he was black and his name was withdrawn and he never played for England. And it wasn't until Viv Anderson played for England. Sorry to be a pain in the neck, but so I'm quite bound up in this. So I think there's certainly, if people are so minded, I'm quite happy to put down a form of words while you're discussing other things. And if people are happy with that, we can then move.
Brilliant, thank you, Peter. Yeah. So I'm just conscious of time, that'd be really useful. Eleanor, sorry, I haven't let you speak.
So I am the Cabinet member responsible for equalities as of last week. For the past 2 years, I've been responsible for children and education. So I just want to provide a bit of context of what we have been doing to tackle racism, race equality, following the Black Lives Matter movement and some of the inequalities that were coming out through COVID that were really, to many people in our community, very obvious before and were really brought to the fore. So this is my third evening meeting this week. My one I was at last night was with the Joint Consultative Committee with Ethnic Minority Organisations that Merton Council was one of the first to set up and has been very, very active. When I was in education, I attended race equality conferences run by young black people in Merton schools. So why I'm providing this context is we've been thinking a lot about what the priorities are for the residents, particularly our young people who are from ethnic minority backgrounds, and bluntly looking around the room, there's not many here today. And so Peter, to your tangent about why we haven't been pushing forward on this, that's not what we've been being asked to be pushed forward on by the communities. They were saying push forward in housing, push forward in health, tackle poverty, tackle these real inequalities, which is not to say that making sure that the scourge of slavery isn't kind of duly recognised isn't the right word, but you know what I mean, kind of understood and remembered so that we don't forget about it and so that we know that that's where a lot of privilege that we here in this room kind of had came from. It's not to say that isn't important, it's to say that we have been led by what our black, Asian and minority ethnic communities have been asking us to do. So I'm really happy to kind of take this away and look at it and speaking to other colleagues in other teams responsible for street names. I imagine we would want to speak to other residents as well. I don't think the residents here are necessarily representative even of broader Wimbledon residents, but I wanted to reassure you that we are doing a lot of work to ensure that the curriculum of schools covers a whole much broader range than it used to of history, that we're working with community organisations representing ethnic minorities, and we're focusing on that. Sorry, Paul.
Brilliant. No, that's very useful. But are you? Because we could of course have a vote on whether we're going to do a broad motion. Are you saying we should have a vote on it, or are you happy? Shall we see what the drafting comes up with at the end, and then see? Or are you saying you want us to vote on it ultimately?
I'm saying that we've got a new administration now in the councils. We've got a new leader. We have a new cabinet team. So when you contacted people in the past, that was when we were in the middle of the pandemic, focusing on other things, and our budgets were tight. I would be happy to discuss it with the leadership team in the new cabinet, so including new people responsibility for housing and community.
So you'd rather not have a motion, you'd rather take it away and talk to
I'd
the
rather
cabinet.
promise to look at what is.
I'm the chair. I'm you know, it's not for me to decide these things. What does the group think? Would one be rather a motion, as long as we agree the wording, or would one rather leave it to Helena to take it back to cabinet?
Can I just ask a question, Eleanor, please? When you go, if you were to go away and discuss it with the relevant people, be it cabinet or whoever, how would we then get feedback on that?
That's a very good question.
And
I mean,
what influence could we then have, you know, if you got nowhere, could we then put forward a motion and would that get knocked back because we were ready to discuss it and decided that it wasn't feasible at this point in time to do something?
yeah, so bluntly my concern with the motion is if it comes up with something that we can't agree to, then what? Then we'll still be in that position. You know, if it comes up with something that I don't know costs too much money, or you know.
Well, okay, we've talked about this a long time. So let's let Peter work on the motion. I think he's got the flavour of what you're saying. We're not trying to prescribe to the cabinet what they must do. We're asking for the cabinet to move forward on it. So let's just see, and then we'll come back to it. Yeah. You know, from nothing to do with this particular issue, I'm very keen for community fora to actually show they do have a role to actually push things at council meetings. So from that perspective, I was very keen on the idea.
And just ask a question: is it particularly the cabinet has to go to, or can it go to the full council?
No, it goes to council. Go to the council meeting. The council meeting would then vote on it, and then the council. The council cannot tell the cabinet what to do. All it can do is ask the cabinet to do certain things. The cabinet is the executive, but what the council can do is make a recommendation. So let's leave it there. We'll come back to it at the end. And now, I'm not doing very good with the timing. I'm sorry, I have to be strict. Regina, you have three things. Well, one. Perhaps you can explain. It is no longer.
Yes, the travel. Yes, I had a question about the travel lodge and the application for the 24-hour license. Yes, and so that has now been cleared up. Okay. Yes, I had one of my points was the application by the new hotel in Hartsfield Road, the Travel Lodge, because they had put in, as we were told, a 24-hour license application for people to consume alcohol on the premises and for people to take out. So, that would be really a first one here in Wimbledon. So, but I have now been told that actually it's not for taking out alcohol 24 hours. It would be a takeout alcohol from 10 in the morning until 11 o'clock at night. So that does reassure me slightly, I have to say. Because also the question is, with policing and everything, how, you have people leaving a bar at 12 o'clock and then going across the road to buy some alcohol, and so...
So what we've established is that's not an issue, the travel lodge one. So moving on to your 2 points. Wimbledon Bridge parking you wanted to say something about.
Yes, the motorbikes, the delivery motorbikes on Wimbledon Bridge. Because originally that space had been put there for people dropping off people at the station. But whenever you go past, it's full of motorbikes. So, if you want to drop somebody off at the station, it's double parking. And also, it is quite unsightly. So, I really want to find out what's going to happen about it, because I do think it's not a very good, coming here this evening, going past it, it was just full of motorbikes.
Is it illegal, or can they park there?
That I do not know.
Well, I guess that's the first question really. Is it legal for them to park there?
I can give some information. Before I do, any other questions on that, or I give some information I'm aware of. Sarah.
So it's not just the parking where the loading, offloading bit is. Today they were all seated, all round Wilco, the actual drivers themselves. So even when you're crossing the road, you've got this whole row of people just sitting across the road, waiting for their delivery orders to come through.
Yeah, and what I can report back to you, and I'll have council, but the bit of information I do have is that the council is aware of this. Something called a locations board, which is a cross-party meeting of councillors with all the agencies, the police, fire, all the agencies basically who look at particular locations. They are very aware of this problem. So it's a London-wide, if not a nationwide problem in many of the big cities. They are doing a report and coming back to us at the next location boards, which is next Thursday week, the 23rd, where they're going to come back with some proposals about what they're going to do. So the council knows it's an issue. My inbox is full of it. I'm sure many councils' inboxes are full of this in the centre. It is an issue. The council is seeking to address it. And what I would say to you is I will come back to you via the minutes perhaps after the location boards report back on what the council is proposing. I hope that helps. But does anyone else want to say anything? Sorry. Any councillors about? Okay, well it's just, if no one else, I think it's a good point. I think it is being addressed. I think the council is aware of it.
I did get some feedback from Craig Herring at Love Wimbledon today on this. So they've identified alternative spots for them in Hartford Road, St George's car parks. What they're trying to do now is to get the delivery companies to update their algorithms to send the bikes to those spots instead of the Wimbledon Bridge. Apparently there's been some progress in that, but they're still meeting with those companies to get them to update their systems.
What is going to happen during the tennis fortnight? Because that's where the tennis buses go.
They'll have to move because there'll be a great bus there.
So hopefully they will.
Yeah. And I should add also the MP, Stephen Hammond, is also part of that discussion as well. There's a cross-party thing. Everyone's aware of it being an issue, and it is slowly being addressed. And the Hartfield Road space has been there for a year now. They're just not using it. So it's all about getting these algorithms to actually do the right things, which clearly isn't at the moment. Moving, so your last point was Dundonald record.
Yes, I'm afraid. I mean, it's mainly the bins in Dundonald Rec. I think they are not really fit for purpose there, especially outside the playground. Every morning when I go past, there is rubbish all over the place, especially at the entrance to the playground. Foxes come in the night, they can still empty the bins, and you know, there's sometimes waste there that people have even brought from home. And for the children here, you know, to have to wade through this rubbish to go to the playground and go to school, I just think it's just not right. Something sort of ought to be done about it. And also the playground itself does need some updating, which I had mentioned already before. I mean, some of the things don't work properly, and it's an area that lots and lots of children live. So I think they really do deserve something better than that.
Chris, oh sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say it would appear to be a problem in a number of the recreation grounds across the borough, and perhaps it is time to look. I believe they were removed from Wandle Park in Collier's Wood as part of an experiment to see if that actually created, you know, and hopefully encourage people to take their litter back home. And I think that might be a better way forward, because unless you're going to empty them every 15 minutes at times, with folk, they're probably more of a pain than they are a solution.
I don't know, because it didn't encourage people to take their rubbish home when they removed the bins.
It was a miserable failure.
Chris had an update he wanted to give.
So yeah, so I forwarded the information you gave me onto the Parks team, who then took it straight up with Ida Verdi. So the idea is because as the weather changes, you suddenly get an influx of activity. So Ida Verdi is supposed to up their checking and their emptying of these bins. If that's not happening, then the tone of the email I got could best be described as slightly worse than passive aggressive. They didn't get on with it. So clearly they're going to be looking at how well they're going to react to that change and are clearing up in a way they're supposed to. So they are chasing that up. And there was a particular issue I think you raised about a roundabout. That apparently it does have a mechanical speed restrictor in it, but they've asked IDV to go and have a look at it, make sure it's okay.
Is there any? Are there any plans of updating that playground a bit?
I'm not that I'm aware of.
Because it's sort of.
That's something to take out with your ward councillors, I think, to take forward.
We'll do.
Any other comments on that? I would advocate Fix My Streets, which I found very useful. The the app. I've reported things on it, and it is beginning to work, it seems to me. So I would advocate you all look at that to report things. And you must report. We can't just sit there and wade through it. You must report. And when it's not been cleared, you must go back and tell us.
That's the problem with Fix My Streets, where it says something's been resolved and it hasn't been fixed now. Big problem.
I'm looking into this. Sometimes sometimes I think it is that Veolia are closing it down because they think it's on private land and not on their land, and sometimes that's just incorrect and they're wrong. And so then we're having to address that with Veolia. Some of the other instances I need to speak to Natasha about, because I know they have had some issues.
I've also heard that the map of Fix My Streets is not the same as the map Veolia uses, so when you pin a location, it's not exactly the right location, and then Veolia also can't find it. I don't know if that's true or not.
Well, because I've heard from Veolia Ruptures that they think what people do is people start to submit it and then kind of walk away from the area, and then you need to make sure it's pinned in the exact place, which I'm sure you think
you have to do is you have to go to your emails and then send confirmation on. You get an email asking you to confirm you want to submit it.
Not if you're registered. If you've registered, then you don't have to do that each time.
Yeah, then you have a pin, then you don't need to. No one's saying it's perfect. It strikes me as it's definitely a move forward. And there's, the other thing is we as a community must shame those who drop all this litter as well. That's part of it as well. It's just incredible.
Can we get those details in the, sorry?
No, I was just going to ask a question while you're talking about foxes. Those black food waste, the brown food waste bins, the foxes know how to get in them. So at least on my street, every Monday morning, there is food strewn all over the street. Why can Merton not buy or give us bins like some of the other councils use, which apparently are more complicated for the foxes to get into? Or if Veolia would actually show up when you type in on Fix My Street, that our entire street has food waste all over it for days. I just don't understand, why can't we get new bins?
Okay, and that's something we can record and we can raise.
I'm a weird conspiracy theorist, because I swear that foxes couldn't get into them like a few years ago, and they've suddenly started being able to get into mine last year. I think they've evolved. They've evolved. So I keep mine in my black bin until it's exactly bin day, because that's the only way to keep it.
I put it out overnight with a brick on top and high up. But I mean, not everyone in my street does that, so it's fine if mine doesn't get knocked over and dug into. But if everyone else's does, it doesn't really matter.
This is happening when you put the handle down.
Yes.
Not the handle up.
Yeah, even with the handle down. So I didn't believe, when I first was told this, I didn't believe it, and then the foxes started doing it with my bit, and then honestly I thought they've evolved and they've learned these skills.
So you put this question, sorry, someone else wants to say something. But which bin do you put the fox in when you've shot it? And although I say that frivolously, I did find somebody had double bagged what I thought was clothes, and then it actually did turn out to be 5 dead foxes. And they put them in a recycling bin.
Oh.
I moved into waste bin. I think one of the issues is that because the public bins are not clear enough, and people are using them for food, that actually encourages the foxes. Urban foxes know where to find their food, and if people put food out for them, which some do, it's a problem we've got. But unless Veolia and the council, the contract for clearing the public bins is more efficient, we may always be faced with this problem, unfortunately. And it's down to contract management, and that clearly appeals to us as a community to be absolutely inappropriate. You're useless at it, frankly. Council useless at managing its contract on rubbish, in my view. Totally useless.
I'll come up very quickly. So if you, just today, so we've given Veolia a service improvement notice, and we've put together a plan with them of what we think they need to do more of. And I think we've put out something just today on exactly that, because we think we do need to use our contract.
Where have you put it?
On the website.
On the website.
On the website.
Have you tweeted it out?
Yeah.
It's going out.
Yeah. What we've been again, like with the previous discussion, what we've been concentrating on is doing that work behind the scenes. And then now that we've got the plan, we're telling people what it is. But those conversations with Veolia to hold them to account have been going on, for some of them.
Okay. Very quick.
Sorry, one more. No, it's reasonable to bring it up now rather than as I was going to do. Which predates Veolia, were on council estates you had the large brown food waste bin containers. Now, whoever created those, the food waste bin is smaller than those containers. And unless that container is absolutely put in the middle, you get waste going down the sides. It would appear on the estates, caretakers, cleaners, whatever, do not have either the ability, desire, or the being told to clear those bins from things which have dropped down the side, from dead fish to plastic, this, that, and the other. So can that be looked at?
Well, this is something. This initiative is something that should be raised with Clarion at an estate inspection, I would suggest.
Well, not all bins, not all estate and block flats bins
where it is
are Clarion. The ones which I'm aware of are, but obviously you get them on some of the bigger private estates as well.
Janet has something. Do you want to say something about this? Yeah, Janet.
You know me and Clarion.
Go on, sorry.
You know me and Clarion.
Yeah, I do.
Clarion are aware of the problem on the estates and everything, not just in London but all around. And they've actually got the London South Scrutiny Committee actually looking into this at the moment. And they will be in contact with the council, Veolia, and everybody else they can be. And I can assure you of that because I'm the chair.
Excellent, excellent. Well, there's best practice, and that perhaps can be taken out to a non-Clarion estate. So, let's, if you could report back to us on that.
Well, it'll be some time at the moment because we've only just started. But it will be nationwide for Clarion, not just for London.
There have been times when I've had to ask Veolia, while they've been collecting bins, which include the food waste bins, to actually collect the food waste bin. You know, they don't like jump to do it like that.
Sorry, last week.
No, I just wanted to say, can you mention in the minutes about the registering for Fix My Street and what that people do need to register?
Oh yes, we'll include that, so they don't then need to be emailed.
That's all, yeah.
Right. Okay, moving on now. David, you had...
Yes, it's just, for those of you who don't know me, my name's David Hall. I'm Chair of Trustees at Wimbledon Community Association, which was a charity set up just after the war as a sort of charitable arm of Wimbledon Borough Council. Used to run the community centre in St George's Road, which had to close about 10 years ago. Charity used to have an interest in the site, so we, when the place got demolished, we invested that money and we used the money to support the website Wimbledon, which some of you will be aware of, I hope. We've just got some new flyers. The font is unfortunately smaller than I had hoped. I have to have a word with my member of staff. Anyway, we've got a couple of members of staff who, and a website developer. And basically, since the community centre closed, we promote community space across the borough. And so there's lots of venues across the borough which appear on the websites. All those venues are members of Wimbledon. We also have organisations who are members of Wimbledon who do various activities across the borough, and we promote the events which are going on there, and we write blogs and articles occasionally if you're interested in people who are interested in writing articles for us. We are run by a very small group of trustees. There's 3 of us. We had 4. One of the trustees just decided to move to Spain. And we have 2 part-time members of staff. So it's a very small team. We literally support ourselves through our dividend. We don't have any grant funding, but we do rely on voluntary and trustee support. Jackie and I have been doing it for 10 years now. We would welcome anybody else who wants to come forward. We're actually coming up with an ambassador's idea for particular areas of interest. So we'll look out on the website for that as well. And we'll hopefully provide some more information via Chris as well on that. But it is a charity which was set up in the, as I said, in the Wimbledon borough area around the time of the war. So there's lots more information on the website about that. Happy to take any questions now or catch me at the end. And if you didn't get a postcard, I can pass them out.
Thank you. Any questions? Any other issues that you want to raise in the open forum?
I'll get to my one point in a minute. In terms of consultations, I wasn't aware until I accidentally stumbled across it that Transport for London have a consultation running until, I think it's early or mid-July, in terms of bus changes to the network, mostly in central London, north, south and east. That's, I think, which particularly directly affects Merton. But one of the things which it says is that if you didn't know which bus you were getting and how frequently they might be, the stops that they were alluding to go to would have the countdown thing fitted to them. Now in Mitcham, the one which was there has lost its countdown sign when the bus stop was replaced. The one outside Wimbledon Town Hall, sorry, I still call it that, Tesco's, disappeared some time ago. They are actually highly useful. If only if you know you can buzz across the Burger King and buy a burger before you get back to get your next bus when you're riding back in Wimbledon late at night. Can the council do something in terms of its transport policy to actually say that, you know, our mobile phones, they do run flat. We do actually use them for other things rather than try and check the next time the next bus should be. This kind of information communication, it's been shown demonstrably under studies in the past is there is good information about public transport. People are more likely to use public transport and not get in their car.
Thank you. Any comments on that? So,
No, I'm just going to add, it's not just there, it's all along, outside the theatre, further along, all those boards have all gone.
Any new bus stop indicators gone.
Yeah,
It doesn't come back with a new shelter. They've all gone.
Just to say, the Wimbledon Society did raise the issue with the council as well about this, or with one member of it, Social and Planning and Environment Committee of Wimbledon Society, asked about it. Just told the problem is that the bus stop might be set up by the council and replaced by the council, but the information board underneath the responsibility in transport for London, so it's combining getting the two to work together. And apparently the information boards are due to come back at some point, but I'm sorry I can't recall exactly who has responsibility for which, but it strikes me that perhaps there needs to be more joint thinking and working on these issues.
okay, well, I will take an action away from today's meeting to ask what's happening and report back to the next community forum, perhaps in the minutes. Sorry, Ellen, do you want to
Yeah, I was going to probably that as well, and the new cabinet member for transport is Stephen Allenbritis, who many of you will know, previously to the council, and he can liaise on this. But the other point I was going to add, that just reminded me about the other big consultation that Transport for London are running at the moment is on the proposed expansion of ULEZ, the ultra low emission zone. So if you Google ULEZ consultation, that consultation runs until the 29th of July. We're really keen that people get their views. Councillor Mike Brunt and I will be holding a meeting about it for Abbey and Wandle residents, I'm not sure there's many here, in a few weeks' time, but please do take a look at that.
Thank you. Thank you. Right. Now, the last issue, and I don't have time to do what I was planning, the last issue was the future community fora and how we actually run them and how we get more people. We've had quite a lively discussion today. But there's only, again, no more than 15 now non-councillors here. That's not enough, frankly. It's not representative of the community, although I'm very pleased you came. Ellen, I know, is looking at this at a council-wide level, so maybe, Ellen, you could say something what the council is doing, and then we'd like to hear any views you might have on how we get more of our fellow residents along to these meetings. But Ellen, do you want to say something what the council
I won't say much taller than say, yes, I'm now responsible for community engagement, and Chris had already started the work doing a survey about community forums, including responses from, very importantly, people who don't come to community forums, because we want to know why they don't come. And we are working and thinking about community engagement much more broadly, beyond what these forums. These forums could become something very different, and we could add new meetings, or we change them. So we've got really wide-ranging ideas, and really keen to hear your thoughts.
Can I ask a question of the other non-councillors, how you all found out about this? Because I found out about it, I'm just member of the public, and I found out about it because I happened to know Christine, who sent me an email saying you might be interested. But I would like to think that I'm a fairly engaged, interested member of the community, and I had no idea about it other than her email.
And I found out about it from Rebecca.
Let's hear from the public first.
Councillor, I then wrote to the name I was given. I have to say the email from the member of staff of the council wasn't particularly welcoming or friendly. You may want to pick that up as well. It didn't encourage me.
Any other members of the public? Yes.
Can I just say that on the Wimbledon website, you can go on and register for matters that you need to be of interest. I did that. I thought this was going to be of interest. It has been of interest. Can I suggest, in terms of wider community engagement, one of the things that you might consider is reaching out to the residents' association.
Yes.
I'm the chairman of one of them. There are quite a few around, as you know, so that might be a start.
I'm sure that's right. I'm sure that's right, David.
I was just going to say, 10 years ago when I got involved with the Wimbledon Community Association, I found out about the forum, and there's a mailing list, so I just get a regular email anyway. I think from you, Chris, so that's one. And I think we put it on Wimblecom on a regular basis. This one might not have been on, but we tried to put it on there as well. So.
I found out from the email updates, so I think I signed up to emails probably about 2 or 3 months ago. I had no idea this existed, and I was getting all these emails. Most of the stuff I wasn't that interested in, but when I heard there's an in-person meeting, meet people face to face, I'm like, hell yeah. So part of me thought, if there's a way that could be called out more on the website somehow, that might be helpful.
But I was introduced by the late Reverend Andrew Wakefield. So, that takes us back a few years. And I've been trying to sort of come to the public meetings ever since. But I suppose also because with COVID, there were no public meetings. So people probably just sort of, it went out of their mind. It sort of went, by the wayside somehow. And probably there needs to be some more publicity. I mean, I'm not quite sure how to do that. But I mean, there probably needs to be more awareness locally to get people going.
We've said word of mouth is clearly important. More talking to other stakeholders, other residents associations, it's clearly important. As I said earlier, the Wimbledon Parliament Association has their meeting tonight, so that's how distinct things are at the moment. These are things. Sorry, you want to say something?
Well, I think people don't really know what those community forums are, what it means to them, why it might be useful. So I think it might be useful just to let people know what they are. I bumped into someone on my way and she had absolutely no idea what is that. So, it's a lot of people who just haven't a clue that this meeting actually happens. And one suggestion is, given we're in the WhatsApp group era, is anybody who is connected to a WhatsApp group puts it out there to people and lets them know what it's about.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. One of the reasons why I'm keen for it to explore its powers is it will become better attended if it actually does things. It's not just a talking shop. I know that's important to communicate. I know it's important to have that dialogue, but I think it can do more than that. That's what I'm interested in exploring.
You used to put notices in the local paper. There used to be a notice of that meeting.
So,
there used to be notices in the local paper about it.
There's a few things with the local paper. One, hardly anyone seems to get them anymore. Their distribution is quite poor. And two, putting an advert in the local paper is more than my annual budget for community forums. So it's just not a cost-effective way of doing things in comparison. We've had more joy over the last couple of years with Facebook advertising as a way of getting traffic. So I think that's something we're going to look at, see if we can push that a bit more and find some wiggle room in the budget to do that. But the paper, they used to carry news items, but if you look at the Wimbledon and Wandsworth as it is now, if you find 2 Merton-related news articles in that paper, we've had a good week, or bad week, depending on your point of view. So it really is difficult to get them to cover it, and we used to be able to get them to put stuff in by giving them notification, but now it's got increasingly difficult as if you read the Croydon and Sun one, it's virtually the same paper with 1 or 2 changes, and the same in Bushman as well. So they're not covering the local area as much as they used to. So stuff like this gets missed out, unfortunately.
Susan.
I think another flag for those people who don't use Facebook, and there are quite a few driving on doorsteps. I talk to lots of people. We're not that email connected, and I think we need to get the word out in other non-internet ways. So definitely residents associations, church groups, any sort of community group. It would be good if the chair or the reviewer or whatever could be told about this and encourage people to come.
Yes, the trick is all the channels we should be using. We should be using all the channels, and we should be doing something more than just doing a talking shop, in my view. And both those things will help turn these into what they should be, which is bottom-up democracy, and that's really what we want. And that brings the community into some of the compromises that we as councillors have to make, particularly those in power. So it's not defending myself, but the community has to be part of those difficult decisions. And I think there'd be more reality about what can't do. I think that's important. I think it's a sensible sort of mature discussion about the pressures any local authority is under.
Of course, if we lodge a motion tonight, that's very exciting.
Sorry?
If we lodge a motion tonight, that's very exciting. That's a way of saying the community forum does something.
I think it is. It won't be wholly uncontroversial, as you say. But I think it's exciting. But here is what Peter suggested. This community forum is concerned to note that at least some roads in Wimbledon are named after former residents who were slave owners. We call upon Merton Council to consider attaching to the road names additional information that those roads are named after slave owners who lived in Wimbledon. That's the basic. I'm sure we can tidy up a bit of it, but that's the basic motion. What is the view of the forum?
Can you just read it?
Sorry, do you want me to read it again? Sorry, was I mumbling? Sorry. This community forum is concerned to note that at least some roads in Wimbledon are named after former residents who were slave owners. We call upon Merton Council to consider attaching to the road names additional information that these roads are named after slave owners who lived in Wimbledon. I think, I might suggest a rewording, additional information explaining the context of these names or something, but that's the basic idea. It's broad enough to form a consensus. It's not trying to direct too strongly. It's simply, Peter's point was, and I think he overstated, and I think some councils did respond, but his point was he'd been trying to push the council and it hadn't happened. So here's an example of bottom-up democracy, where the forum is saying that now, I have an interest, I want the forum to do these things, so I should shut up at this point. What do you think, Mike?
I think the first thing we've got to realise, I'm afraid, pragmatically, that there's a lot of opposition out there, things to do on a Wednesday evening. But I think that motion is so important because it shows a result that hope that this forum can get under officialdom's skin one way or another, and then come back and show people who are here tonight that there is an effect and it does do its job. I mean, we've been often talking shops forever and then, but at least it shows you can come back with a result, with an answer, and say, yes, this was discussed, it was put forward, and we have a result. That's what the forum did. And there will be other problems and questions out there which the forum can raise. At the moment, it's 3 monthly intervals, quite a big interval between them, and issues tend to drift away. But something like this, in 3 months' time, we should have a response to the motion. And we can say to people, look, we discussed that, we actually got to officialdom, and this is the response, so we do something.
And you are using your...
quite important.
Yeah, and you are using your constitutional power. That's what the point of forum. Any other views?
Yeah, I mean, the Wimbledon Community Forum certainly seems to be the one that is the most regular, the most frequent out of all the borough ones, which probably does somewhat demonstrate things like Love Wimbledon and the fact that lots of things happen here. And it's good that we have a good representation of councillors. I would perhaps like to see some of the people who weren't successful as being standing for councillors perhaps to come along to these kind of things.
That's a difficult answer.
I'm a member of, church groups, but it's you know, they look to me to be the person that comes along and that sort of like, you know, and I sort of like represent 120 people. They've all got different views. They all say something different. So I say, you know, why are you sending me along here? You know, or rather not coming as well. So how you engage with those kind of things. Obviously, the more controversial the activities are, you know. So we had a good one when the bank development was proposed, and those kind of things. So it's as certain bigger issues come up, then it becomes a little bit more heated. You know, today's been a little bit more considered about things, but hopefully no less important for actually getting things done. And this format is worth keeping, but if you want to include other ways of getting residents involved in different things, fine.
So is the consensus of the meeting that we should put forward this motion?
Yes.
Yes. Yes? Okay, we'll do that. Okay, brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you. I've forgotten anything.
Just the date of the next meeting,
which is?
The
The next meeting is on the 21st of September at 7:15 here, of course. Thank you for coming. Please tell your friends. It's fun. We do discuss things. And if they don't like the motion, tell them that's the reason to come to the next one as well, remember, okay? Good. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
I do a radical war about Morris and the subject.